This week on Offscreen, we're reading Manchester by the Sea. An uncle is forced to take care of his teenage nephew after the boy's father dies. Okay, so Kenneth Lonergan, the writer-director of 2 movies before this, You Can Count on Me, which starred Mark Ruffalo and Laura Linney, and Margaret, starring Anna Paquin, Matt Damon, Matthew Broderick, and others.
Did you see Margaret, or did you just tell me that it was good and you read the screenplay, or you heard it was good or something?
I read the screenplay for Margaret, and it's probably my favorite screenplay that I've ever read. And
but the movie's been made, right?
So I read the screenplay around 2008, and the movie had been shot in 2005 or 2006.
So my point is, you've not seen this movie?
No, I've seen the movie.
Oh, okay.
The movie was tied up. Lonergan and his producers couldn't come to a mutually agreeable cut of the film.
Oh.
And it was mired in post-production for...
Okay.
I believe 6 years before getting a very limited kind of throwaway release.
But you saw it.
In 2011. Yeah, I saw it.
And what did you think?
And I thought it was a masterpiece.
Okay.
I thought it was, yeah.
Not just the screenplay, so it actually...
Was it
much different from the screenplay?
There were some changes, some somewhat substantial, others more minor, but
okay.
By and large... The screenplay and the cut of the movie that I saw were similar enough in like tone,
okay.
Character, theme.
I was curious because that movie is pretty much the reason that we read this, because you told me,
right?
Hey, that screenplay was really
right.
good.
You asked all these questions knowing the answers. I appreciate that.
Well, no, I didn't. I didn't remember that you'd seen the movie.
Oh, okay.
But I guess it's helpful context.
Right. Manchester by the Sea is scheduled to start shooting later this year, starring Casey Affleck and Michelle Williams.
Was that decided after it was on the blacklist or before? Because I thought the point of the blacklist was like, hey, these scripts haven't been bought yet.
No, they haven't been produced yet.
Oh, it's just produced.
Yeah. So they could have been purchased.
Okay. I would say that that's bogus, but at the same time, it's true that stuff, even after it gets purchased, a lot of times never goes anywhere.
I would say probably most of the time.
So yeah, that's okay. I'm going to stop trying to complain about this whole process.
Well, do we need to restate what the blacklist is?
I don't know if you want.
The blacklist is not a best of list. It is at best a most like list. That's how they self-describe.
I feel like you really like that wording.
I mean, it's pretty
you
clever,
always
right?
Quote that part.
Yeah. It was compiled from the suggestions of over 250 film executives, each of whom contributed the names of up to 10 of his or her favorite scripts that were written in or somehow uniquely associated with 2014, and have not begun principal photography during that year.
Okay.
So you're going to synopsize it for us.
Yes, I'm going to try to. Okay, here's what I have. 40-year-old Lee Chandler works maintenance in a middle-class Boston apartment complex. His boss doesn't like him, and he drinks pretty heavily, though never while he's on the job. One day, Lee gets a call and rushes to the hospital in Manchester by the Sea, a few towns over. By the time he arrives, his brother Joe has already died of congestive heart failure. Now it's up to Lee to break the news to his nephew, 15-year-old Patrick, Joe's only child. Lee picks him up from school and even takes him to the morgue to see his father one last time. And in a series of flashbacks, we learn about Patrick's estranged mother. She was a drunk, much worse than Lee, and abandoned the family while Patrick was still very young. That's why when Lee visits a lawyer to read Joe's will, Joe has chosen him to be Patrick's new guardian. Lee is hesitant at first to take responsibility for his nephew. He tells him that he plans to stay in Manchester only as long as it takes for him to sort out Joe's affairs. Then Patrick will have to come back with him to Boston. Patrick is furious about this. He's lived in Manchester for his whole life. He's on the hockey team at school, he plays in a garage band, and he's even juggling 2 girlfriends. But most important to Patrick is his late father's boat. Joe used it for fishing, and in the off season ran whale watching tours with his friend George for extra income. It needs a new motor, but Lee would rather just sell it. The sooner he can leave Manchester by the Sea, the better. Clearly something about the place makes him uncomfortable. In another series of flashbacks, we learn why. 5 years ago, Lee was responsible for an accidental fire in his Manchester home, which killed all 3 of his children and drove his wife to leave him. He was too grief-stricken to even attend the children's funeral. Now faced with his brother's memorial service, he's determined to go, but complicating matters is the fact that Joe's body can't be buried yet. It's winter in Manchester and the ground is too frozen. Much to Patrick's disgust, they'll have to freeze his father's body until the spring thaw. Nonetheless, a large crowd turns out for the service, including Randy, Lee's ex-wife. She's pregnant now, and Lee meets her new husband, Josh, for the first time. One person conspicuously missing is Elise, Patrick's mother. However, she does reach out to Patrick later, inviting him to lunch with her new fiancé, Jeffrey. Now that she's sober, Patrick hopes that she might be his last chance of staying in Manchester. Lee, on the other hand, doesn't trust Elise. Feeling threatened as Patrick's guardian, he begins to take more of an active interest in the boy's life. As it turns out, Patrick's reunion with his mother is a disappointment. Lunch is awkward, and her fiancé Jeffrey sends him an email afterwards explaining that perhaps they just aren't ready to take him in yet. Lee, meanwhile, buys a new motor for the boat. Everything seems to be going his way until he runs into his ex-wife Randy one more time. She apologizes for the things that she said to him after the fire, but the subject is still too painful for Lee. He's driven to drinking again and ends up in a fight at a local bar. Lee wakes up at George's house, and seeing his happy wife and kids, the 2 friends arrive at an idea. With Patrick's blessing, George agrees to adopt him. They sign the papers, and it's not long afterwards that Joe is finally buried. Lee even finds a new job, close enough to visit Patrick, but still not in Manchester by the Sea. In one final flashback, Lee remembers fishing on his brother's boat amid the breaching whales, a time when both of their families were still intact and happy. The end.
Nicely summarized.
Is that good?
Yeah, sounded good to me.
That felt long. That felt really long. I feel like we should do these shorter next time.
Okay.
But
no,
for now,
good.
That's fine. But yeah, I want to mention, first of all, before we say anything else, I kind of fudged the outline a little bit, as I told you before.
But only a little, yeah.
Yeah, but like some of that stuff didn't happen quite in that same order, which is part of just my beef with the story. Like the way I summarized it, it sounded like the end of Act 1 was like when he finds out that he's Patrick's new guardian. But the messed up thing is that doesn't actually happen until like halfway through the screenplay.
That what?
He finds out that he's Patrick's guardian, like legally speaking. That doesn't happen until like halfway through.
Is that true? What page?
Okay, hold on. Page 52.
So yeah, that's like a third of the way.
No, it's not.
It's 135 pages.
I know, but that's...
It's not half.
No.
Yeah.
That's like into Act 2, well into Act 2.
So where does Act 1 end?
Well, okay. I'm not saying that acts are strictly like a page measurement.
Yeah.
But like, if you're not out of Act 1 by the end of like 30 something, then what are you doing? What are you doing?
Well, yeah, but that might be for your average 100-page screenplay.
This one is a little longer, but it's not like ridiculously long. It's
not
like
135 pages. It's the longest that we've read so far.
Yeah, but that's still like, that's not unheard of. I feel like even if it's 135 pages, if you're like proportionally sizing up each act,
yeah,
then like maybe page 40. This is another problem that is also connected to the same problem of that. You find out that he is going to be Patrick's legal guardian at the exact same time that you find out about the whole fire thing, right? You remember?
Yeah.
Because they do the whole flashback thing, and like in the middle of the meeting with the lawyer,
that's when the flashbacks kind of begin, and they're a big part of the screenplay.
There are lots of other flashbacks before that, but they're about Patrick's parents, basically. I think one of them's about his... I think one of them is about Lee as well.
The ones that are more subjectively associated with... or associated with Lee's subjectivity...
Definitely.
...begin at this moment.
Yeah. But so, that, to me, that's a big no-no. Like,
see, I think that works. I think it works thematically. Because Lee's the biggest reason why he's hesitant to be Patrick's guardian is one, because of the painful associations with Manchester by the Sea, but two, also he has this like fear of responsibility, where he was responsible for his kids and he goofed and they died terribly in a fire.
Like the hardest goof.
What?
He goofed like as hard as you can goof.
Yeah. It's
I didn't say it in the summary, but like he was drinking with his friends.
Yeah.
They were playing, I think, ping pong.
They were playing ping pong. They were having a good time.
His wife yelled at them, and then he had them
Told
leave.
them to go home.
Yeah, so he kicked his friends out, but then he still was buzzed, and he wanted some more beer, and they were out. So
right. But he was cold.
Yeah,
so he put on the fire.
That's important context. So he like stokes the fire, and then he goes to get some more beers. Comes back and whoops, the house is burned down.
Right, and his wife and kids did not make it out. Or
the wife made
his wife made it out, but his kids did not.
Yeah.
Tragically.
What kind of mom is that, by the way? Like,
oh no, they addressed this in the screenplay.
Oh, I forget.
She's dragged out by the firemen.
Oh, okay, that's
before.
Good. Good for her.
Yeah. But I mean, yeah, he goofed, but it was like, as the policeman said to him in the screenplay, it's like a mistake, and there's a million such mistakes made every night across the world.
Well, you should be telling this to Lee. Like, you don't need to tell me that. He's the one that feels guilty about it.
Well, yeah, I know, because how could he not? But yeah, he just got unlucky. He got terribly, tragically unlucky. He made a mistake. Most people don't have to pay for it, but he did.
Why does that mean that we have to learn that right at the same time that we learn about... I understand they're connected. I see that.
Because the responsibility that he would have to take on as Patrick's guardian causes the flashback to his fear of responsibility.
Okay. Let me just posit this, though, alternately. I think it would work just as well if the actual end of Act 1, wherever we're saying it is, just is only him learning he should be responsible for Patrick, that he is his legal guardian. That's the end of Act 1.
Okay.
And we can tell that he has reservations about it, not only because of Patrick himself, and, like, that's a lot of responsibility, but they could even really play up the whole ominous thing of why, like, he just hates Manchester for some reason. We don't know why. That would be enough for me for now, for the end of Act 1. Mm-hmm. And then, just about where it is right now, like about halfway through, or I guess closer to a third of the way through, but structurally it's like in the middle of Act 2, whatever. Mm-hmm. That's when it comes out about the fire. That would be fine with me, because then we already knew there was some reason. Now that we know it's this reason, that's going to inform the rest of Act 2 in a way that it's like darker. It's not just the fact that he's like shirking responsibility. It's like he actually has baggage. I just think it's better to parse these things out, like, or parcel them out, maybe is what I want to say. I don't know. But my point is, those are like two huge plot points, okay? Right. He assumes guardianship legally for Patrick. Mm-hmm. And then we discover that he killed all of his kids in a fire. Like,
they died in a fire.
Whatever.
He feels as though
they wouldn't have died if it wasn't for his drunken ping pong night with the bros.
Right. But the important thing here is like the tragedy of it. Like, he feels he's overcome with guilt.
But you see what I'm saying? Like, those are two really juicy plot points.
But
why do you consolidate
you don't
them?
think there's something like effective? I think there's something really effective to showing how closely associated they are.
No, I mean, I see what you're saying, but it's not
just because the rest of the screen. Because from that point on, all these flashbacks are intercut with his time in Manchester.
It's not,
and I think kind of the point is that his time in the present in Manchester is haunted by his past there.
Yeah, definitely. And I agree. I just feel like it takes me out of the moment, and those are two What people are going to make that connection anyway. People aren't dumb, you know. They're going to realize, oh, because of the fire, that's informing his,
Yeah.
you know, his trepidation about wanting to take responsibility for Patrick.
But I don't see how just spacing them out. I think see
that's
in
just
some situations. I don't see it here being more effective, I guess.
I just think it's better form because to me the difference is not just like a logical thing. Even it's just a matter of enjoyment and entertainment. Like you have a given number of juicy plot points and information to reveal in a story. Would you rather have them clumped together in a few points, just like at intervals, or would you rather have them like spread out evenly throughout the story?
I
that's
think generally speaking, I would say you're right, but I don't think that's a hard fast. Is that a word?
Hard and fast rule.
Hard and fast.
Like
hard
that?
and fast rule. Yeah. And I think I think this really shows how deeply entwined they are, the two things. And it kind of taps into Lee's subjectivity, and we kind of get to understand him a little bit better.
How do you feel about the other flashbacks, though? Because like they started doing it pretty early, actually. Like when he's first going to the hospital and finds his brother dead.
Right, they have a flashback to his first time there.
Yeah, and they even like allude to like the sound of a fire, and they never say what it is. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
That was so weird to me, but like those.
I think that's effective, right?
That just confused the heck out of me when I heard something.
It's confusing in the moment, but it was not confusing once you're further along.
Yeah, but
it's.
I wasn't talking about those so much, but I didn't like that, just for the record. But the flashbacks of like other things that are not as subjective, like the stuff with, his memories of his brother and when he was hanging out with his brother and Patrick when Patrick was younger.
Right.
What do you think of those flashbacks?
I didn't have a problem with them. I take it that you did?
Kind of.
Yeah.
I just also have a problem with flashbacks in general.
Yeah.
I feel like the flashbacks in this have the same problem that I see all the time with flashbacks.
Okay.
Which is that they're not like motivated enough. With the exception of the one you're talking about, the big crucial one about the fire, definitely that was like motivated by what was happening to him, and it triggered that memory.
Yeah.
But all the other ones, I feel like they're just planted in there at convenient points for the writer to get the information across that he wants. And it's weird because it's like you said.
What's an example of that?
Okay, like there's just this one in the middle. Let me look at my outline.
Yeah. They kind of struck me as being triggered by action in the present tense of the screenplay.
Okay, well then riddle me this.
I'll ready to riddle you.
This is about halfway through. I think it's actually a little later. So this is after the whole fire reveal. I'm looking at like scene number 36. I don't know what page number that is.
Scene number 36.
This is my outline. Refer to my outline, please. Don't look at the screenplay.
I want to see it on the screenplay. I don't trust your outline.
So there's a scene where Lee goes to pick up Patrick from one of his two girlfriends' houses. Okay?
Yeah.
And he's just like taking him home after that.
Yeah.
And then there's a flashback. It says 10 years ago. And it's a flashback of Lee with his brother giving a whale watching tour on their boat. And then they go to a bar afterwards and they're like making fun of some of the customers that they had at their tour that were like gawking at the whales.
Okay.
Like, what's the point of that? And it's not like triggered by anything.
Oh, I found it. Okay. You have to admit, though, the scene before the whale watching flashback is really funny. Can we talk about that a little bit?
Trying to have sex with his girlfriend?
Patrick's trying to have sex with his girlfriend. Her mom keeps interrupting.
Sort of like you're interrupting the point I was trying to make. See, I think you're like diverting. But go ahead.
Anyway,
we're
just going to talk about this funny moment. Because ostensibly they're doing their math homework. But Lee comes to pick up Patrick. And as Patrick and Sandy, one of his girlfriends, are leaving her room, Jill, Sandy's mother, asks Patrick, how's the math homework? Patrick responds, very frustrating. Jill replies, good.
She knows that they're actually having sex.
She knows
and
that
it's
they're
good if
trying
it's frustrating. Yeah.
Yeah, like
That was a good line. That
was fun. That was funny.
But back to my point.
Back to your point.
Yeah, 10 years ago, right there.
Yeah, I see it. I mean, I guess it's not directly motivated by anything that comes before it.
And like you said, what?
I don't necessarily see it as problematic, though. I think, well, on one level, the being in Manchester is very associative for Lee, but it's just some character stuff.
Well, yeah, but like you said, the
building.
fire one, at least that one's like really subjective feeling.
Yeah, this is just a memory that comes to him.
Yeah, but like
of like a happier moment following
like,
a less happy one with
whatever. It's like, like environmentalists say, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem.
I think a lot of people say that, but yeah.
Whatever, that's where they got it.
I don't think so, but anyways.
Anyway, moving on.
Yeah.
My point is that like if you have a scene that does not have a like an express purpose towards like giving us some information that's important, it's like a problem to me. Like it's wasting time and it's just like confusing me by making me read into it and be like, does this mean something? Like, what am I missing here? It makes me wonder about that when sometimes there's nothing to wonder about. It's just there as like local flavor, like it's just a little memory.
Well, what's wrong with local flavor?
Well, there's enough of that anyway, and you don't need to flash back and jump 10 years into the past for that.
So I would say I guess I would agree with you that it doesn't strike me as an essential scene. It could be one that could be cut.
That's how I felt about a lot of the flashbacks.
But it does build character. It does speak to Lee's relationship with his brother Joe.
I guess.
It does show that they were once happy in this place in the past, and that they no longer are. And as you can see, that scene segues to the present with Lee lying in Joe's bedroom, and he smiles.
Yeah.
Presumably, having remembered this memory that they shared together.
Yeah.
Is it essential?
I was afraid you're going to go. I was afraid you're going to go into the whole whale metaphor thing, or if it even deserves to be called a metaphor. I don't know.
That's the end. Well, you didn't like that. I thought that was pretty good, pretty effective.
I still think the whale thing was kind of weak.
But we can get to it later.
Okay.
But I think we can agree with this, maybe.
Okay.
That the theme of the movie, to sum it up in like a word, is like, or a phrase, is like coping with grief, and recognizing that you're not alone in your grief, that other people are affected by things too, have their own personal tragedies.
That's a more acceptable answer. I don't like it when people say that the theme of this movie is just like blank, and they just say like a phrase.
Well, I did say I was going to sum it up in a phrase,
but I feel like it should be an actual statement. I feel like it should be like a sort of like an argument you're making for how the way the world works,
like
the way things work. Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah, that's what a theme should be. I feel like I always.
Well, I think a theme.
I think there. Okay.
Yeah.
I think there are like two ways you can define theme. One is more of like a motif, I would say. I think that's a better word for it. And it's just
a motif is something that recurs.
Yeah, like just an idea that you want to just plant in there throughout, something to think about. But like if you have an actual statement or like a thesis, to me that's the more important definition of theme. Like, I don't like it. I always make fun of like, oh, that's like a metaphor for lost innocence. Like people would say sometimes like that would be a theme of a story, is like lost innocence. Like that's boring. Like what does that even mean for that to be a theme? That's basically just saying that's what the story is about. That's not like a helpful thing to me. I want to know. You
want to know what their stance on lost innocence is.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get back to the whale thing in a bit, I guess. But I had a few other like points or notes that I made of things.
Sure. Well, what overall did you think of the screenplay?
Oh, okay. Well,
I mean, we should probably.
I sound mean. I think I sound meaner than I am.
Because when we talked about this before hitting record, you sounded more positive overall.
Did I?
Didn't you?
Put me on blast.
No, I'm not saying it's a bad thing.
But I liked it. It was fine. It was just not great. I didn't think it was like stand out.
Okay.
It was not like there were things that were blatantly like not working or didn't make sense, which to be fair that says a lot. If you can just write a full screenplay that's coherent That's
Yeah.
actually a hard thing to do. I feel like that's an accomplishment. But this is the blacklist. These are supposed to be like, a
But
select few. And I feel
not
like
to throw shade on some of the other stuff that we've read from the blacklist.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily a marker of
That's true.
much.
That's true. But I guess maybe
quality.
I'm trying to be optimistic here, and like I have high hopes for all of these when we read them. And this one was not that remarkable to me.
Okay.
Are we giving it are we saving the rating thing for later?
We can pepper it in wherever. I would give it a recommend. I think it'll make. I think it could be a very good movie. I think it was a good to very good screenplay too. It didn't have the scope or kind of the magnitude of Margaret. Margaret was sprawling, almost 200-page screenplay, a huge cast of characters, set clearly definitively in New York City post 9/11, and all that stuff resonated really for me profoundly, movingly. But I thought this, while much smaller in scope, it was kind of more clear and direct in its focus, and the theme was, as I said before, at least that's how I saw it. And I thought it was well articulated. I think Lonergan does a great job writing dialogue.
Yes, I totally agree with that. The dialogue was great. I wasn't crazy about the dual columns thing.
Right, he does love that.
He likes
apparently.
two people talking at the same time, and so he has two columns of dialogue side by side on the page, and you don't really know what order to read them in, and it's just kind of overwhelming when you're reading it.
It's kind of a way to designate that these characters are talking over each other.
Yeah, but I think that is not for the writer to decide. And if he's
He's writing to direct.
a writer-director, that's fine. But still, I feel like just write it normally, without the dual columns. Just write it turn by turn. And then just when you're actually shooting the scene, just be like, hey, you guys can step all over each other's lines.
Right.
That's cool. Just interrupt each other. But that's a director thing. And it makes it difficult for me to read.
It is. I had definitely had trouble, kind of figuring out where to jump from one column to the next. Apparently, it is a playwriting thing, and that's where his background lies.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I don't know. This is.
I don't know that either. I haven't really read enough plays. I've never read a play that does that, but
I read that somewhere long ago.
Okay.
But
anyway, the dialogue. Other than that. Formatting thing, I thought the dialogue was the strongest, maybe the strongest thing about this.
And I think it's kind of impressive and uncommon. He writes young teenage characters and their parents too, equally well, across generations. Everyone's given a strong, unique voice, and
that's a really
it's
easy.
not condescending to anyone.
Yeah. Or it's not like a really easy way to piss me off about writing children is it seems like everyone wants every child character to be precocious and really adult and mature, and it's supposed to be funny or cute or something. And I hate that. I hate that so much. I think it's more often the case that they just don't know how children actually talk, and so having
been so removed from it.
Yeah. But these kids sounded like kids, but they also used a lot of awful nasty language, and I think it's also part of the Boston, that whole culture.
Sure.
But it didn't feel fake. It didn't feel like a precocious thing to me. It just felt authentic, which was really impressive. I really thought, the dialogue was one of the best things about this.
And I think he does a good job both in this and Margaret. He writes these really flawed characters that not really flawed, but believably flawed.
Okay.
And it's not like he's forcing likability on anyone. He's just writing.
No, certainly not. In this one.
He's writing kind of well-rounded, relatable people that are imperfect, that make mistakes, that are more or less well-intentioned, I would say.
Okay. Yeah. I want to get to a couple of these other notes that I had about some critiques.
Mm-hmm.
I think the ending resolves really abruptly. There's a montage, and I can't remember. I'm going to look this up. It's right after Patrick finally has sex with Sandy and decides that she's actually going to be his only girlfriend. Yeah. I mean, it's more her idea, but
probably something that she had
What?
and pushing forward for
Oh,
that.
I would hope so. As long as she knew about that. I don't even know if they know about each other.
Well, I guess they hadn't.
She,
it's not clearly clear at what point.
Anyway, after they sleep together, suddenly there's this montage where, like, everyone's going to Patrick's hockey game and, like, cheering him on. And then, like, later he's playing baseball in the spring and they're cheering him on. And then, like, Lee gets a new job suddenly. And it's just like out of nowhere, everything seems like it's falling into place. And it's like it's right after that drunken bar fight that Lee has, because he was like all depressed about seeing his ex-wife and talking about the fire. They never actually like resolved that, so I don't know why there's this like happy montage thing happening.
Resolve what?
His whole baggage with the fire and stuff.
I think, yeah. I don't think it's so easily resolved.
Right, and it shouldn't be, but I'm just saying, like, why is that montage suddenly happening right after that where everything seems happy? I thought that would have made more sense if it came after the decision for George to adopt Patrick. In any case, I still feel like everything resolves kind of quickly. Like,
I agree that the resolution is...
There's very little time between the, like, idea of, oh, hey, maybe George, the family friend could just take him in, and then, boom, they're signing the papers, and, like, they finally have the actual burial, and then, like, they go get ice cream. That actually happened. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah. I mean, who doesn't want ice cream?
Besides the other stuff resolving really abruptly, just the thing with George deciding to adopt Patrick kind of came out of the blue for me. I mean, I know that they
said... It really come out of the blue.
They set it up a little bit, but George is not a big character at all.
George is consistent throughout the screenplay. He's there at the beginning.
Yeah.
He's there every 20 pages. He's not a huge character now.
Yeah.
But he's there enough. His relationship to the family is established.
Yeah.
His relationship to Patrick is
true.
established. It doesn't come out of it seems like a plausible thing.
Yeah. But I don't know. It felt like kind of lazy to me on Lee's part a little bit. Like, they actually make a point earlier on, I don't know if you remember this, but, like, shortly after Lee comes to Manchester to help Patrick and, like, watch out for him and stuff, they go to the boat and they meet George there. And they almost make a joke out of it, like, Lee tries to kind of pawn off Patrick on him right then and there. And we're supposed to think, like, oh, that's kind of messed up that he would just do that.
Yeah.
But he ends up doing that, and that's the end.
Yeah.
So am I supposed to think that that's messed up? Or am I supposed to think, like,
No.
oh, that worked out really nicely?
No, because I don't think you're supposed to think it works out really nicely, but I think it's a imperfect resolution.
Okay. I wanted it to be, I guess, more extreme. I wanted it to be...
But I think the screenplay sees like this process as a slow, gradual one marked by small improvements rather than, like big revelations. Okay. And I think that's one of the most effective things about it.
Okay. I wanted to have a stronger feeling, and I didn't feel like the screenplay itself was trying to, like, make me feel very strongly about it one way or another as to whether it was right or wrong that George would adopt him. I kind of wanted to be more angry about it. Like,
I don't think it's wrong. I think it's a practical thing. It's not a perfect thing.
Yeah.
But I think maybe the biggest difference between those two scenes is that when George does end up officially adopting him, Patrick better understands why Lee can't do it in Manchester by the Sea.
Yeah.
And I think, and this is on page 102, Patrick he's on the phone talking to one of his girlfriends, and he walks into his dad's room, which is now where Lee is staying, and he sees the 3 photographs on atop the nightstand of Lee's kids, and it dawns on him, perhaps for the first time, that the only tragedy here isn't just that Joe died, but that Lee is suffering through a lot, and that just by being in Manchester is extremely painful for him, reminding him of the death of his 3 children in that fire, the loss of his wife.
The 3 children that he burned.
Well, he clearly didn't.
That he set on fire.
He didn't set them on fire.
Pretty much.
yeah, but you know what I'm trying to say. You know what
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
saying.
I get what
you know
you're
what I'm
saying.
saying. That Patrick isn't alone in his grief. That
Yeah.
other people too are grieving. Not to go back to Margaret, but I'm gonna go back to Margaret. That's like a similar revelation that a character, or a similar moment that a character is sharing that. And I think it's really moving that we can't necessarily understand each other completely, but we can recognize the fact that we're not alone in the feelings that we're feeling.
Okay. I think you're reading into that a little bit when all that happened was he saw the pictures.
Well, it's not just that, but it is the subsequent stuff.
Yeah, but I also...
And his change in demeanor, because you later see him after the...
Patrick's demeanor?
Patrick's demeanor. Yeah, you see him after Lee's fight, which was precipitated by his encounter with his...
bringing up the past in the fire. Yeah.
You see Patrick offer Lee, like he sees Lee like with his face swollen, sipping a beer. Patrick asks him if there's anything that he can do for him.
Yeah.
It's just this kind of like opening up of, or burgeoning like self-awareness, I guess, that while we feel like we're the center of the world, we're not the center of the world, and that everyone else.
That's nice.
And that's another big thing in Margaret.
I did feel like I was missing a scene where they actually explicitly talked about the fire. Maybe that's too on the nose or too much. I don't know. It would have done the same things that I think you're saying.
But I think it's more effective that it's unspoken. And I don't think it's necessarily a natural conversation for Patrick and Lee to have.
I feel like it definitely would have come up, though, and I feel like it could.
But when the fire occurred, Lee was like 6 years old.
Yeah, but he must have known about it. Like,
he knew, but it's not something they talk about. Like,
but they make
if my parents died when I was 5, you wouldn't like come up to me and say, "Hey, Stephen, remember that time when your parents died in a fire?"
Maybe I would. You don't know.
I mean, maybe you would. But you probably wouldn't.
They actually did have all those other characters, like who would talk to Lee in passing, and then after the scene was over and Lee is gone, they linger on those like side characters, and they're like, "Hey, that was the guy." And you remember that?
Yeah.
They did that. So I feel like it wouldn't have been totally like off the mark to just. I don't know. It would have made sense for them to have a conversation.
But Lee knows all those stories.
Well, yeah.
I mean, not Lee. I'm sorry. Patrick knows all those stories. He knows everything.
Yeah.
What's he gonna? Why would he? I don't know.
I'm coming at this from like a really macro perspective again, and I'm just thinking like, okay, this is a story about a guy whose children all died in a fire, and now he's being left responsible for another kid.
Yeah.
I would just think if you told me that's what the movie was about, that's probably going to come up when those two talk to each other at some point in the movie. That seems like a thing that'll probably happen. But
it's kind of weird for the kid to bring it up to his uncle.
Well, he wouldn't have to bring
it
up.
And Lee's, I think, too kind of fucked up.
Like, there are plenty of other things that could have just happened that neither one of them chose to happen that would have like reminded them or would have brought up that topic, I feel like, and it would have been a good conversation. But
I mean, they kind of do have they don't have this conversation directly, but they have this conversation insofar as it relates
like textually,
to. No, they kind of have it explicitly, but they have it about Manchester. Well, I think it's also important to talk about how Randy, Lee's ex-wife, approaches him at the harbor or the dock or whatever, and apologizes for how she acted toward him.
Yeah. After the fire.
Yeah, following the fire.
Would it be fair to say she kind of blamed him?
I would say that. Well, she blamed him. Yeah, I would say so.
And then, I mean, that's why she left him basically. But now she's kind of apologizing.
She blamed him, but she realized that she was blaming him in part for her own grief, I guess.
Yeah, okay.
Her own suffering, and that he too was suffering.
See, there's that theme again of yours.
Well, I feel like that's the same.
She was all. Yeah, I'm saying that's a good thing. She's all caught up in her own grief and blames him for it, and doesn't realize like he's grieving too. Yeah,
and it's not as though Lee is without blame. He's certainly to blame.
No, yeah, he almost murdered his children.
Well, I mean, okay. But mostly that it was a terrible accident, and yes, Lee was a big part of it, but, people react imperfectly to tragedy.
Yeah.
And I think her apologizing for that is like a really big thing.
Yeah.
But it also shows how she's come to terms kind of with the past more so than Lee, and that
definitely
spurs Lee to drinking, where he in turn picks a fight Like he's quick to getting in fights, especially when drinking.
I didn't think of it that way, but that's a good point you say about how she's recovered in the way that he hasn't. I think that's a really helpful screenwriting tool, is to have a character that represents exactly what the protagonist has failed to do.
Nice, yeah.
That's kind of what she does. I mean, that's definitely like the purpose she's, I think, serving in the story. I just didn't think of it that way, but now that you mention it, yeah, I like that. But the whales? Wait, so what about the last?
The whales. So the last scene, we should say, it's a flashback to 9 years earlier. Lee and Joe and their families, Patrick, Randy, Elise.
And their father also.
Oh, and their father. Yeah, they're all there. And it's a nice sunny day at sea. And
they're fishing.
And all of a sudden, a gray whale breaches the water 20 feet away.
And everyone's like, whoa.
Yeah, and the whale is closer, and it's enormous, gigantic.
The last line is actually woohoo. Oh, it says everyone. Everyone says woohoo.
That's just awestruck by the gigantic whale. The boat I'll just read the last two little paragraphs. The boat rocks dizzily over the enormous wake. They are happy and excited and fearful. Pulling back, we see the little boat among dozens of others bobbing in the sea, with the dark shapes of the whales moving under the water all around them. And I think that's kind of like a visual metaphor for, I guess, kind of tragedy, or like these big events in life that you don't really have any control over, but they're big and they're awe-inspiring or whatever.
I like
but also terrifying.
Yeah,
you know?
I like that juxtaposition that it says they're happy and excited and fearful.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's a cool thing, and I think that is important thematically. It's just a shame that nobody seeing the movie is going to read that particular action line because it's just a description.
Right, that's a good point.
But yeah.
But when you pull back and you reveal all the other boats, that you kind of see.
You mean all the other whales?
You see the boat among all the other boats with all these other whales too.
Okay.
And you see that first. You see it close on this one family, and everything their experience, and you see that reflected in the experience individually of all these other, presumably families, and it's kind of like a unifying thing. Like we're in this big sea together or whatever, and not in complete control of it.
If they were in a literal sea, maybe those kids wouldn't have burned to death, though.
They are in a literal sea here.
But I mean, at the time.
Yeah.
Incident.
Yeah.
I did think I wondered for a minute if that was a purposeful like duality set up, fire versus water. But I may be reading into that. But I see your point.
Yeah, I didn't think of it like that, but maybe. I don't know. Is there anything you want to talk about?
Well, I don't think the whales were that helpful. I mean,
I don't necessarily think that relates. There are whales throughout the screenplay, but I feel like it's a different context. You feel like
the whales were just latent throughout the screenplay. That like the visuals of the whales leading up were just like plants early on that didn't really pay off until that last scene. Is that what you're saying?
Kind of, yeah. Okay. And I think having seen everything that in the screenplay that's come before it, it kind of refocuses our attention on what the significance of the whales might be.
Okay. The
whales and the boats and the sea, like all that together.
Okay.
Because we see these people. There's a scene, I think it's when Lee he's talking to an older man, and that older man tells Lee how he lost his father.
Oh, that was cheesy, I thought.
But, I don't know. Okay. It's just I don't think it's much. I think it's just a paragraph of dialogue.
Yeah.
And he says that his father went out to sea and didn't come back. And it's just like a throwaway line. From the perspective of the characters that we see in the screenplay, It's like nothing. But to this one dude, if the screenplay were centered around him, it would be the main thrust of the screenplay. And it's kind of, I think that's what he does. I think that's what Lonergan does really well in general, is he creates a world outside of the screenplay. and you get a
Okay.
sense that it's not just these characters. These characters are absorbed in their own issues, but there's all these other issues out there too.
It does feel very much like a slice of life story,
Yeah.
where it's just like we're almost a fly on the wall, and this is just the particular drama we happen to find ourselves, following from place to place. So yeah, I see what you mean there. Maybe if my inner voice was like a better actor, then it would have delivered that particular line a little bit more effectively. I think I just thought of it as cheesy before when I read it.
Well, that's fair.
But so should we like wrap up and give it like ratings?
Yeah.
You already said you.
I already said
would.
mine. I obviously am a big fan of the writer. Well,
Yeah.
having read just one other thing by the writer,
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of his.
I think it's a consider on both.
Okay.
For me.
That's fair.
Is it a recommend on both for you?
Let's recommend on both for me.
Not a strong recommend though. We
I
have
wouldn't
that. We have that option.
We have that at our disposal. I feel like that should be reserved for...
Yeah.
A recommend in and of itself should be very rare.
Yeah.
A strong recommend should be...
I think
This,
you're already
like,
blowing.
shit
You're
is-
already blowing your
this shit is-
recommendation load on this one. This is only episode. I don't even know what episode this is going to end up being, but
I don't know, man. I've read a lot of screenplays from the Blacklist.
wait, have you?
Okay, fine. I read a lot of screenplays.
Period. You're done right there. You read a lot of screenplays.
Okay, and I probably didn't read that many relative to other people, but whatever. I've read enough to know that a lot of them aren't that good.
Yeah.
And whereas you
yeah.
could see this as a successful movie, I can see this movie winning an Academy Award.
Whoa.
Not
calm down.
not necessarily best picture. It probably doesn't have the scale for like it's kind of a small story, but
Yeah.
you could see Casey Affleck getting a Best Actor nomination.
Casey
right?
Affleck has to get a lot older before he can play this.
He's just gonna grow a beard.
Yeah.
I don't know.
He could do it though. The Boston thing.
Yeah.
Matt Damon can play the kid.